Welcome to RPG Reanimators, a podcast for GMs where we dissect horror scenarios and offer our experiences and advice to reanimate it at the table. I'm Lex,
I'm Nathan.
I'm Alex.
I'm Holly.
so let's see what's on the slab. The case report for this session is Convergence, which is a scenario written by John Scott Tynes for Delta Green. In this scenario, a teenager with inhuman strength leads agents to investigate the source of strange abductions and human experiments in a small town in Tennessee. As with any dissection, we'll be discussing all the gross innards of the scenario, so from this point on, there will be spoilers. So if you're interested in playing this scenario, please stop here and share this episode with your GM so they can listen and consider running this for your group. We'll also include links for where you can purchase a copy of this scenario for yourself in the show notes of this episode. Now with that out of the way, let's begin our dissection. So, Alex, tell me what's actually happening behind the screen in this scenario.
Right, so Billy Ray was actually just one of many things that has gone wrong out of the town of Groversville. What's happening behind the scenes is the Migo have basically set up the entire town as an experiment for their new proto-matter, which improves the human body. They've infected the water supply with this proto-matter, and they've started to alter the livestock as well as other humans with new like organs, and to mix things up as well, the evil branch of the government, aka Majestic 12, and they're helping out the Migo, but they don't know they're the Migo. They think they're the Greys, which in the Delta Green lore, the Greys reached out to Majestic 12 and the US government in order to give them technology in exchange for allowing these experimentations to be done on American people. So there's a lot of messed up stuff that can result from said proto-matter contamination as well as these surgical modifications. Billy Ray, one of them. He was given super strength by having his muscles replaced by the Migo.
So, on that note then, Nathan, can you tell me about the initial briefing and how these agents are brought in on the case?
All right. Well, this starts out, like Alec was saying, with good old Billy Ray Spivey, who has been captured by the FBI after he went on a spree of robbing gas stations for their pain medication and money. It turns out when aliens replace your muscles, it really hurts, and their pain meds wear off pretty fast. So he's been running around trying to deal with it as best as he can, and he ends up punching a gas station assistant's head off. So the agents get a hold of him, and that's when they start to figure out, there's something maybe in Groversville we need to look at.
Once they get to Groversville, are there any main locations that the PCs are going to be checking out?
There's a couple of maps full of locations, but most of them aren't super intricate, so you'll want to make sure that they know about Merle's Shut-Eye, the only hotel in town. Contains a couple of key individuals we'll talk about in a bit, and is where the agents will be resting. There's the town hall with the infamous aldermen, victims of this proto matter, where kind of the leadership of the town has merged into a collective. The reservoir, which is ground zero for this proto matter being dispersed. And finally, at the very end, your characters are most likely going to end at the barn or Migo installation.
And are maps provided for any of these, or is a lot of this detail going to be up to the GMs in this case?
There's not really interior maps.
Okay.
There is a map of Groversville.
Yeah, I saw there was the one kind of Google Earth view of Groversville,
Right.
but I didn't know if there was anything else I was missing.
Yeah, there's a couple. There's one where you see the town quite closely. It details things like the liquor store. A lot of these locations aren't covered in the text. But then there's also one higher up that shows you where the reservoir is in relation to the town. And frankly, that's about the only bit of different information it has. It's really interesting that they took almost a full page for a map that says the reservoir is north, huh?
Hey, it's not as bad as the map in Extremophilia. I can say that much at least, where half the page is just gray space.
Yep.
Holly, can you tell us about some of the NPCs that players are likely to encounter, living or dead?
Yeah, there's a good number of NPCs in this scenario. There's, of course, Billy Ray Spivey, the person that kicks all this off, Agent Derringer, who contacts the agents and gets them involved, Sheriff Dan Oakley, the local useless law enforcement, Angel Spivey, Billy Ray's mother, Jane Allen, his girlfriend and unfortunate human incubator. We'll get into that later. Scott Adams, the body in the hotel with lots of information for the characters. The alderman, sort of a town council for anyone who didn't grow up in small town America. The Phenomenix producer, Frank Carancola. Of course, Adolf Lepus, the icky leader of the MJ12 outfit here
No,
in
he's
Groversville.
so cool. He's so cool. Even the back calls him a sadistic, psychopathic, hardcore badass,
Okay.
which
Mm,
seems
that
to
doesn't
imply
sit
you
well.
should like him, but yeah, he's terrible.
Yeah, in the lore, he's a bad person. He's a really bad person. Adolf Lepus is a child rapist.
Yeah.
I'm saying it right here. It's written
Yeah,
in the lore.
it's so edgelordy.
But yeah, there's a lot of NPCs that are detailed in the text, and a fair number of them provide some actually plot forward for the players to uncover. So
And so you've mentioned the Migo and the Greys and a little bit of allusions to protomatter. Do we want to get into the general threats that the agents are likely to encounter in this scenario?
Well, the main one that you're almost certain to do because it's very cool is the Migo are actively experimenting on the town, and that includes the players. So probably at least one, maybe two agents are going to get snatched up. They're going to lose time in the classic abduction style, and they'll come back improved, quote unquote, with protomatter. They may not recognize this right away. They might find this out later, and that's a really fun discovery to figure out that, oh, there's a reason your eyesight's better and it's bad. There's also instances of rogue protomatter where, in Scott Adams' case, his protomatter kind of got a Migo kill switch. They really Manchurian candidated him, if that's a phrase. And now it's still on the loose. It's still just randomly killing people, which is kind of funny. It's like a little blob that's just trying to kill agents. And the last bit is everything is under surveillance in this town. The Migo are watching through people. They are able to kind of body hop between them. They say one at a time, but there's six Migos, so that's a lot of coverage in the town, including through the sheriff, families, that sort of thing, and Majestic there, keeping a lookout, although they kind of fade into the background I've found in the text.
Until the very end, I hear.
Yeah.
The thing about the Migo is they can see and sense through everyone infected with this protomatter,
Mhm.
and that's everyone in town because everyone's drinking the water, everyone's having the food.
Including the agents most likely, which is
Yep.
also makes this a very difficult scenario for the Migo are going to be watching literally everything you do. It's going to be tough to surprise them.
Oh, that's just giving me so many ideas for way that you can have town NPCs acting really weird. Maybe there's just a lady that's eating. The agents are driving away, and then they see the cop in his car is driving, but making the same eating motions as they're just hopping from one body to the next to keep an eye on them.
It's creepy.
yeah, I think in one of the write-ups, and forgive me, there's like three at this point, and I've read all of them at some point or another. It's some of the write-ups, they're just kind of, these people are kept kind of passive and like, not passive, but trying to think of the right word.
Like they get kind of zoned out or something.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I
Most of them are in a really dreamy kind of dissociative
kind of a
state.
dream-like
Yeah,
state, and
yeah.
so and that's always a good cue to the players too, is like they talk to Jane's mother, and Jane, who hasn't been there in days, she's like, oh yeah, she's just been about a week since I've seen my teenager.
That silly kid.
Oh, that's how
That's
teenagers
Oh,
are,
really
right?
kids.
freaky.
Been a couple weeks since I've seen my husband. Well, isn't that odd?
That's one of the narratives I really like in this with regarding the alderman is everyone just says, oh, they're just busy. It's tax season. And
It's
especially
not
if you
tax
can,
season.
yeah, if you can rehash that exact narrative, that exact inflection over and over again, you start feeling that kind of Invasion of the Body Snatchers weird peculiarity.
Yeah, other threats include Phenomenex, though they really just get in the way and really make it inconvenient for our agents here as they get in their face with like cameras and recording crews, and agents really can't do anything about it, uh, like officially.
That was something that I had some ideas about in the more in the reanimation section, because I think it's funny is that they say Phenomenex is mostly just there as a thorn in their side, but Majestic invited them into Groversville, which to me would indicate that the Migo may be instructed to leave them alone. They're there to help ensure the cover, so Phenomenex may actually be the safest people in the scenario. But besides that, are there any key events that players are likely to come across?
Oh boy, there is a lot to this. It's very sandboxy. So you're for sure gonna have Billy Ray. You're gonna talk with him. He's kind of the outset. From there, you can go anywhere in Groversville, and Holly, we'll have to lean on you of where people start to go from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a nice sandboxy. And people pick different things every time they go. Every time I've run it, just really depends.
Yeah, might start with the family, might check into the hotel in town, might meet with the sheriff.
Hmm.
There's a lot of opportunity there, and then you dig deeper and deeper. And usually it seems like they try and have the farm, the Migo stronghold, observation center as being the ending, because there's really no coming back from whatever that ends with.
And on that note, though, if the scenario was really sandboxy, players can go different places sort of each time that you run it. Is there generally a timeline that GMs would want to keep in mind to keep the scenario moving at a decent clip, or not so much?
So there's not really a timeline, I suppose. It's just like a bunch of bangs or like oh shit moments that the agents encounter as they continue their investigations. Like, and this scenario has some really great, like, shocking moments, and there's more than a handful, right? There's that part where they get the briefing and they just drop the bombshell that this killer that smacks people's heads off and puts his fist through people's torsos. Oh yeah, he's in the next room. Like that's such an oh shit moment. Also, when they finally get the testing fluid for the proto matter and they spray it on everything, everything gets detected as containing proto matter, especially the reservoir.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that spray? Because that gets delivered, I think,
3 days
3 days
in.
in? Yeah.
That's correct. So 3 days in, the Delta Green handler, Derringer, he's like, "Here you go. Here's 24 gallons of this spray, and you can use it to detect that foreign matter that we found in Billy Ray Spivey." So the agents, they're obviously going to start using it, right? They're going to spray the air. The air is a little contaminated. Okay, let's try food. That's more contaminated. All right, how about the reservoir? It's the brightest that it's ever been. And then when they test it on themselves, they're infected too. So that's another
Mm.
great moment that just shocks the players. There's some other great moments where an agent might just wake up having been experimented on. Like, let's say they were a smoker and now they're just breathing in the freshest air that they've ever breathed in for a long time. That can be quite a shock as well. It just makes the players feel uneasy, which is fantastic.
Good things are happening, and I don't like it.
Exactly. It's like even though this good thing is happening, there's this horrible connotation behind that makes the players feel just icky. It's like I'll talk about it in war stories, but I'm going to continue on with some more key events. They're going to find the aldermen who have just been morphed together into some like conglomeration of flesh and proto matter, and it's quite horrifying because everyone else sees the aldermen as normal because of the protomatter currently in them, nullifying that their vision. There's the bathtub protomatter scene with the journalist Scott just exploding. His head explodes into protomatter, and it just like tries to escape or attacks the agent.
Actually, could you talk some more about the bathtub explosion scene? Because that's one, actually, they don't have a lot of detail about it, but more just recap it in terms of one of their table experiences.
Yeah, it's not written well.
Holly, have you had any big experiences with it?
Yeah, yeah, that's something that I don't love about it is like it's a cool scene, but the way it's laid out in the book is just as an anecdotal experience rather than a write-up of like here's what's going to happen. But yeah, the it's definitely an oh shit moment where the players find out what happened to Scott Adams, who apparently has died by suicide in his bathtub in the hotel. But there's still the proto matter, which compelled Scott to, or compelled him to madness at the very least, is still lingering around his corpse. And the players can have an interaction with it where it attacks them and attempts to enter them and now infect them.
Yeah, that's cool because also there's not just one of them. There's two. So you get that bang of like, oh shit, this thing's leaping down the throat. You look back at the body and now that little lump
The
on
head
his
That
blobs
lump
off.
on
Yeah,
his head
yeah.
is gone. I think that was in Holly's Into the Darkness game. I was like, oh shit. I think I actually said that during the scenario.
Oh, there's something else.
Yep.
There's two. One thing that I did find was a little disappointing is it's not statted up. It's not this little blob of proto matter is not statted up. What's statted up is the alderman as like the proto matter blob, but like the
Right.
damage is way out of proportion if you try to use it for this small piece. So you'll have to do your own jury rigging.
Yeah.
Do you think it would just be a case of maybe just having everything, dividing it by 2 if you wanted? I mean, it's still saying a 35% chance to hit with 2d6 or more, yet it describes in their anecdote that the little protomatter can apparently destroy a pistol from the inside and then climb inside of someone and just says, they died later. I kind of wish there was a little more guidance in there, but maybe we can get in that in reanimation.
Thanks for telling me how to run this.
It has plot convenient stats. That's what it has.
Yeah. I mean, when I ran it, I just gave it like a d6 damage.
Mhm.
You know, Alex, I think when you run it, you should make it thrilling and tense.
I think so too. I think that I should just tell my players that, hey, I'm writing an exciting, intense game for you with a great climax that you can talk about after the game's over and then leave.
Okay, anyways, back on track. Are there any other big bangs that are kind of integral to the scenario aside from the ending, which is quite a bang in and of itself?
Oh, I alluded to this earlier as Jane being the human incubator, but finding out that she's pregnant.
That,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Could be an oh shit moment.
Yeah, she's what,
That just
6
makes people
months
uncomfortable.
along and 3 weeks or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says that she has 10 days until she pops. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Pops,
uncomfortable.
huh?
Hey, pregnancy horror is a thing.
That timeline, we'll have to talk about that later because we'll have to see what we're looking at for there because 10 days is a long time in gaming time.
Yeah.
Even agents getting the spray after 3 days, it's most of my agents are trying to wrap up the case by the end of day 3. So I'm curious if you've kind of adjusted those timelines just to keep everything moving at a decent clip.
Oh, yeah. And just one more like fun fact for a key event. The details of what happened to Groversville is described in Delta Green's Countdown source book.
Mm.
And apparently everyone just dies. Besides the one Phenomenex guy who's vegan and he brought his own food.
Well, that makes sense, right? Because whenever the Migo operation is stopped for one reason or another, any of this protomatter just liquefies back down. So presumably, almost everyone in the town has been experimented on at least a little bit, or has been just because it says their brain chemistry.
Well, actually,
Oh,
Oh my god.
actually,
Huh?
if they destroy the observation center, that will liquefy it.
Yes, they saved the day.
But no, that will kill a bunch of people, but save the day.
God
Yes.
damn it.
If they make too much of a fuss and the Migo gets sick of them, they weaponize the protomatter, turning it into a short-lived
Yeah, I got comments
flu-like
about that.
virus. Yeah, where everybody dies. I mean, it's the same, but this is a little bit more deniable for Majestic
Right.
than just people dissolved, like their eyes just pour out of their head.
That's unlucky.
Yeah.
okay. So say maybe they destroy it or maybe they don't. I think all roads of the scenario are converging towards the barn as this Migo base at the very end, and that has a surprise guest appearance by MJ12, which, as written, it kind of is just a steamroll shootout, as you found the end, bang, 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 and then it's gone. Am I misreading it here, or is that sort of how it goes?
I think it's really player dependent because I watched Holly's run and they do the hey, I'm an evil government bad guy, and then I know you're
Squirrel
Delta
Pro.
Green, and they flash you like a smile and then they leave. And then that's happened in my games, and in one of my games, it says that if the agents, like in the book, initiate the shootout, yeah, there's gonna be a shootout, but
Mhm.
if not, then there's not. However, there's one time I did break that rule, and we'll talk about it during war stories.
Yeah, I like to play the like, dick measuring contest, the like look at
Mhm.
us, like we consider you to not be a single threat because we know exactly who you are and run along and report back to A cell, you did a good job, like kind of that mocking, like you can't do shit because we've already done everything we wanted to do here anyway, kind of thing. Like,
Yeah, it's a good introduction of Majestic if your players don't know them.
right.
Yeah, that's fair. That also reminds me, gosh, I can't remember what movie it was, but like letting them go, and then they kind of turn to one another and say, "How many people does it take to deliver a message?" And then shoot them in the
Mulan,
Yeah.
back.
that was Mulan.
Oh, hell yeah. Of course, the documentary.
Yeah. But for key events, that seems about it besides like the contents of Scott Adams's
Oh
room,
boy.
which the
Yes.
agents can really use to help with their investigation.
Mhm.
That does seem like a bit of a clue dump in case the agents are missing it. Because it does everything. You've got chopper sightings, lights in the sky, livestock, the aldermen. I think there's even a initialed point at the girlfriend that Scott Adams is housing in the hotel room next to him.
It's kind of the main clue dump in this.
Yeah, so this whole scenario, and I say this with love in my heart because I do love this scenario a lot. This whole scenario is going to be kind of an exercise in the pacing and the GM trick of like giving your players the clues at the perfect moment. It's like, oh, you don't realize that there's a dead body in the room two doors down until I want you to know that there's a dead body in the room two doors down. And at that point, I'm ready for you to have this info dump because you've already explored a lot of the town. So,
So, with all that in mind, what is the beating proto heart of this scenario?
I I done got abducted and experimented on, and they brought me back, and now my big toe's back. It's all these UFOs messing with people.
Right, and it's literally UFOs and classic aliens that like every
Yeah.
player is going to be like, "There's no way, it can't be."
it was the very first Delta Green scenario they ever wrote and really, really captures like the theme of this like conspiracy, UFOs, X-Files. I mean, this was written at
Mhm.
the very beginning of the X-Files years, and it just captures it super well. And to me, that vibe, that theme, that tone is really what the whole thing is about, and like leaning into it. So
I would say it's a conspiracy just within conspiracy because you've
Mhm.
got like the conspiracy with the Migo lying to Majestic 12 posing as the Greys, then you have the Migo and Majestic 12 lying to the public and like disguising what's happening on. You have the counter conspiracy of what Delta Green's trying to stop like Phenomenex and the other news outlets, and it's a whole like web and it's a mess.
Well, that and then the counter narrative from M12 in Groversville that are sending out
Right.
purposefully fake photos and making Groversville a laughingstock so that absolutely no one will believe them. That's one of my favorite aspects of the scenario. And on that note, what would you say are some general strengths of the scenario as written?
This is a really nice sandbox. I mean, you can't go wrong. It's got a nice level of detail with most of the things you'll need. We'll probably highlight a few places you might want to identify later, but it condenses it down. This is only a 20-page-ish
Mm-hmm.
scenario, which I love. I love a good short scenario. It is a tough dilemma. Like the players come in and it's a pretty big choice of, you know, these people are obviously modified. You're not going to kill them, are you? Maybe you will. Just shutting down this might kill a bunch of people. It's really interesting to kind of see where your agents are willing to go with this.
Yeah, I would say I have a lot of praise for the oh shit moments that the scenario has to offer. because it's a lot of shock value. Your players are going to remember it for a long time. And I would say that the setting, it's very much a setting that fits for this scenario. It fits very snugly because I can't really imagine it in any other time period.
Mhm.
Like, this is the time where, internet isn't so uh, intrusive in people's lives. There's no smartphones. So a disinformation campaign would work really well for this small town. So that's just very pleasant to think about.
Okay. And now for the juicy part. What would you say are some of the weaknesses of this scenario as written,
I think we talked about the timeline.
or lack
It's a
thereof?
little long. Yeah, well, right. There's no day by day sort of beat, but they do kind of give you things like, yes, the child will be delivered in, I think, 10 days. The spray comes in 3. Um, Phenomen X has a little bit of a timeline of they might show up for a couple days and then leave, that sort of thing. I really would be interested to watch one of these games get played by the authors because I feel like they go with a much longer time frame for like searching for clues, interviewing people. It'd be interesting to see how they handle that.
Our attention span has been destroyed.
I feel like that's something we say about every Arc Dream scenario, isn't it?
Yeah, I think they just run them more drawn out and probably closer to reality, if we're being honest. Like, you're not
Hmm.
going to get all these interviews done in a day. It's going to, take a while for these things.
Right.
I also think that you could potentially work with the timelines a little more by virtue of playing with missing time. Although
Mhm.
it would be difficult to do this, especially with a larger group of players. If you only have 2 or 3, it might be easy enough to have them abducted, and then all of a sudden they need to pay for their rooms again because their time is running out. You paid for 3 days,
Yeah,
and
nice.
like the bill's due. Wait, what happened to day 2?
Oh man,
That's
Being
good.
able to sort of work on that might work, but like that takes
that's
some
a great in-universe reason for
Right.
why the amount of time
Yeah.
that's passed.
Yeah, missing time can be
Because
terrifying.
I was just gonna say that there can be an argument for realism versus having fun and just pacing the game well.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah.
there's a wrong way, but
No,
it would be interesting to see.
for preference.
I'm with that too. I've run this, I don't know, like half a dozen times at least at this point, and it always goes much faster than predicted. And to me, day 3 to get the spray is like way too long, and the Jane Allen thing is way too. Everything is like paced out way too far. But that's just again the way I run my games.
Yeah. Numbers can be changed around. You just have to
Yep.
know what changing those
Right.
numbers is gonna do to your game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that I think that you hit it on the head that like just wait for the plot beats. If there's a bit of a lull, then it's time for another clue or some kind of realization. If they've stalled out, hey, they get a knock on the door for the spray.
Yeah, this game is a kind of from beginning to end a fast run through shit all the way until until its conclusion.
And that's kind of another interesting part to this is the agents don't do a lot necessarily. They're kind of watched the whole time. And about the only thing they can do is destroy the barn with the installation.
Right.
But part of that is like your agents are going to be watched. They say, like, oh, you can sneak up on the barn. Are the Migo just out to, drinking a cup of tea and not paying attention to the investigators? Maybe, but that does seem like a kind of an interesting choice with this of I just don't know how you can get to the end and have them not do it. Although
Yeah,
they
there's
could
a few plot
abandon,
holes,
but
right?
yeah,
I'd like to bring up the lethality of that barn because, right,
Brutal.
yeah.
there's 3 to 6 Migo, right? And they all have lightning guns.
Yeah.
And on top of that, half of the attacks that hit them aren't going to do anything because of their like macro dimensional skill.
Mhm.
Um,
No, you
Yeah.
can collapse the roof on them.
oh yeah, yeah. Although you can collapse the roof on them, which will kill all of them, which just
Instantly.
throws out all the rules that were just stated.
Yeah. I think that the scenario, if you play it as written, there's just a high lethality to the whole thing. Like,
Mhm.
this is not the beginning of a campaign kind of scenario. And it can be kind of a tough hang. I've had folks not care and folks care a lot
Mhm.
about the like you can be abducted and there's nothing you can do about it. If you just find yourself out on your own, like you can be abducted in your sleep, you can just be abducted, and then all of abduction basically is 100% lethality at that point. So, I can understand some folks not a fan of that. Some folks kind of just chalk it up to it's a one shot and like it's very much in the theme of everything. So, just knowing your players, I think. But yeah, it's a high lethality scenario as written.
It's very funny to me that whenever they're detailing Scott Adams' notes, they say, oh, yeah, and GMs can add in extra plot beats if you want to make this more of a campaign, and then immediately encourages you to abduct all of the agents, replace some vital internal organ like their kidneys, and then, you're going to get melty a little bit later. Also, Holly, just to that point, I have to quote the paragraph for resolutions. A sad and deadly end is hardly out of the question. If so, it's as dramatically effective as a victory, and likely all the same to the Migo, because that's who we're really working for at the table.
Yeah, you got to have players that are into that. If they're not, you prep for that,
Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to have players that are going to be like, why play?
Yeah.
Right.
There's a good discussion for that, maybe for a different episode, but like the one shot mentality of like, go big, do crazy things, like who cares if these characters die? It's a one shot and it's kind of meant to be like kind of go all out and tell a really interesting story. But at the same time that player death can be difficult for some people. So, who knows?
And it fits that Delta Green theme, right? It's all kind of the futility of it all. But yeah, totally. Like sometimes players want the fun of having their bonds decay. They want that long burn sort of Delta Greenness, and this one's gonna be tough. You could burn your bonds pretty fast and still die in this one very easily.
As for another weakness, I'd like to talk about that like lights in the sky clue, because I think following the lights is the only way that they can really get to the barn.
Yeah, it's not good.
And that's like a bottleneck for your agents.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that in Reanimation because I'm very curious.
I have some thoughts about that.
Yeah.
It's weak. It's weak.
There's also the kill switch that the Migo have where, if the Delta Green agents call in the CDC to quarantine the area after they discover protomatter, then they're just gonna hit the kill switch, and after 8 hours, everyone's organs liquefy and they throw up and die. Like, I don't know. That includes everyone, including the agents.
Yeah.
Because the agents are
because they've been
affected.
ingesting the
That just
water.
seems kind of lame that they just die, and they're not even warned that they're gonna die, unless we do a little work.
Yeah.
And that's where I also want to touch on that CDC route in Reanimation, because unlike Extremophilia, I think this one actually has some options for fun roleplay in that. But before we get into reanimating the scenario, as always, what, Nathan?
I want to talk about another weakness. Where's Majestic? The start of the scenario talks about Majestic is doing their counter intel ops. They're in the town. There's people running around, messing with people. But we don't really get any events with them. They're not really engaging with other NPCs that I noticed, at least. And then, they just kind of show up in the end, wave their guns around and say, haha, get out of here, losers. I would have loved to see at least a mention or two of something Majestic would do to the agents, even if it's just slashing their tires.
I think that that's a pretty common Delta Green pitfall of there's a lot of cool stuff going on behind the scenes that there is no way the agents can actually access during the scenario proper. While reading it, again, like one of my favorite parts of this is the disinformation counter narrative that M12 is doing from within Groversville. And I would have really liked some way for agents to stumble on that. And like maybe all the calls are routed and they get the one number and it's local to Groversville.
I have a story about that.
Okay.
I have a story about that in Reanimation. Yep.
And that kind of ties into, I would just like a few more random scenes to kind of flesh out the town a little bit more. There's a lot of locations detailed, and this seems ripe for having just little flavor bits. Doesn't have to be much, just something to put in there, like someone walking a baby and then they see the agent's car go by and they just let go of the stroller and watch the car or something. Like just something to put in there that brings the surveillance back.
For some reason, when you said walking a baby, I imagined like a dog.
Like a dog?
With a collar.
That would be super creepy too. And the dog's in the carrier. The Migo don't get it.
Write that down. But yeah, I think that the scenario has a few kind of allusions to idiosyncrasies like that. One of the ones, it's a complete throwaway comment, but pointing out that they're staying at Merle's Shut Eye. And they mention that Merle Barn is the richest man in Groversville and owns no fewer than 3 other key locations that are all named after him. And I feel like there could be this kind of weird local conspiracy of like this eccentric that's just like, oh, you should go eat at Merle's Burgers. Oh, you need a drink? You should stop by Merle's Malt Shop. Apparently, this just got put in Texas. But
Oh, should I go to Merle's Auto Body? Don't you dare go to Merle's Auto Body. What?
Merle is now. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is Merle not an alderman?
is he?
He might be.
I'm not sure. Is there a list of aldermen?
One of the aldermen's last name is Barnes.
Oh, he says he's the head of the board of
Yep.
aldermen.
Well, he's one of the heads of the board.
Hey,
Got
Hey.
Oh,
Oh,
what's Merle's first name? Last name?
Barnes.
Merle
And
Barnes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that's
He
one of
is
the aldermen.
explicitly stated in Scott's notes. Allen, Barn,
Barn never
Thomas,
goes
Jacobs,
home.
Cartwright, and Anderson
Yep.
never go home. Well, I mean, looks like he got unalived.
So before we get into reanimating the scenario, as always, I'd like us to contextualize our general experience and histories with Convergence. I have only read it and listened to like 3 or 4 actual plays of it, but never ran it myself.
I've ran it more times than I remember at this point. I think half a dozen is a pretty conservative estimate, though.
Woo. I watched Holly's run and then ran it 3 times.
and I've played it more times than I remember, apparently, because Holly was very kind and ran it for us, and I've just listened to so many podcasts of this because it's a very popular scenario for good reason, as people like the themes and everything. So yes, I have played it.
And now, let's get into reanimation. So, overall, how do we highlight the beating heart of this scenario before we melt it?
If I was going to run this, I think the slow burns key. I like the missing time idea to throw in there, but really play up the abduction route. Probably have more like randos on the street that are just talking about their weird occurrences. Really bring in that X-File feel.
Really, I say this as a serial slow burner, but I think this is one scenario that I actually wouldn't go that route on, is reading through all of these events, maybe just because they're put in just this very condensed format.
Mm-hmm.
But this feels like a slip and slide of weirdness that kind of wherever they go, it starts off weird and then it just keeps getting worse and worse until the agents are going to be scrambling to try and get to some end of it. Especially like, mentioning with the woman walking a baby like a dog and having all these odd things start showing up around the town. The Migo are not going to be spying on the agents from the outset. It says that they're going to just ignore them, but as they start making a ruckus, it draws their attention. So having the town start off as just a regular small Tennessee town, people start repeating the same phrases a bit much. Oh, it's tax season.
Mm-hmm.
That's a little odd. But then as they start making themselves more known, people will stop what they're doing and just watch them as they're driving down the street. Or more than that, you can see that it's like one person at a time is turning their head to watch, then they stop, go back to what they're doing. Another person picks up like a series of sprinklers down the line to watch them. Like, that's weird as shit.
That's awesome.
In addition to all of the oh shit moments that are sprinkled around everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Right. To play it up, definitely pace those oh shit moments. Like they're pretty much gold. So like use them. And to highlight the conspiracy element of this scenario, play it up, right? Make the agents paranoid. Have the agents being followed by either the townsfolk or by the NRO Delta Majestic 12 agents. Just put a tracking device on their car and have them like find it.
Yeah.
And then, oh, it's got no serial numbers, no way to track it back. But they'll be paranoid as all hell. And that's great.
And have Phenomenex do that too, but in a much shittier way.
Well, that's great because their shitty tracking device could actually lead you to the real tracking device.
Oh, I
which
like
would
that.
be a fun 1-2 combo.
That's true. Oh, someone put 2 tracking devices on my car.
Phenomenex is a danger to any conspiracy, not just yours.
That's true. Yeah. And have Majestic 12 be a mover and shaker as well. They get to make moves.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll outline that later with improvements.
I think also something that I would just want to note on, we already mentioned that the concept of missing time is already terrifying. You say you're going to do one thing and it's 6 hours later. The player has no idea what happened, and that's bound to cause some sort of a panic. Holly, I remember in your run, they started implementing a buddy system pretty quickly that still didn't work out so well in the end. That, like, I think really being able to play up a ton of results of alien abduction and experimentation tropes, because I think players are going to innately just say, there's no way. Like, it can't just be regular gray aliens. Show them some of the pictures, maybe, but then, like, some of them are obviously fake, but some may not be. And no one is going to believe anything that they say, regardless.
How about you, Holly? How did you kind of highlight this? Because you run this a lot.
Yeah. I'm actually in the Lex camp of the disinformation, kind of really threading a lot of what's going on here. And so when I've run it in the past, I create a lot of more incidences of the disinformation. Like, they're in the hospital with Billy Ray or wherever they are, and the television is on, and like some co-hosts are on a morning show are laughing their heads off about this dumb hick town and the like absolutely dumb stories coming out of it, like Elvis at the diner, Bigfoot in the woods, that kind of thing. And it's like not even like clever hoax. It's obviously fake hoaxes, but they already are associating Groversville with this place they're going to, which should then immediately tip them off that like what the hell is going on here. And I think I've played it a couple of times where people are clever enough that they immediately can see it for what it is, which is a disinformation campaign, and someone's trying to cover up what's really going on here. So disinformation is my favorite part of this whole thing.
Are there any ways that you would try and make that discoverable within Groversville?
So the way that I've run it is all of these pieces of information are attached with an actual name. So and so called this in. So and so has provided these photos. And then as soon as they start looking into so and so, that person does not exist in the town of Groversville. They can ask anyone around and they're like, "Who those people are frauds. They don't live here. They're not from here. Who are those people?" And if they go digging, those people just don't exist, period.
Right.
And
like it's
then,
a population of 1,200, and this is the day when the Yellow Pages is a reliable way to look people up. Like, oh, I like that idea.
Yeah. And I think that one of the games I've played, like they end up tracking some of where these phone calls are coming from, and they all come from like a payphone in the town of Groversville, and that's it. Or I think Nathan, when you ran it, it was you guys had managed to trace the phone calls, and it was a house, and you go in the house, and there is nothing in this fucking house. It is an empty house with a table in the middle of the living room and a phone and a chair, and that is it. Like there is nothing else there. And you could, I guess, if you want to try to trace or tie like the barn in, if you want to tie like property records or like ownership records of this house to also weirdly a barn in the hills of Groversville, like whoever owns this house also owns this barn way over there.
That's so great.
Or what would you think about maybe the name or something being an actual Groversville resident, but you kind of drop a couple of times as, God rest their soul, or it's so sad that
they're just gone.
I like that.
And then it's this old farmer, Jim Bob Spivey. No, wait, can't say Spivey.
I'm following you though.
It sounds like we're on to improvements, and I definitely want to go on to and continue with what you were saying, Holly, with that empty house. I know in another Delta Green scenario I wrote up, like I made like a listening post for Majestic 12. So maybe instead of finding the empty house, this is an opportunity to give them a clue, right? Maybe have recording equipment set up and like maybe a small armory. And then they'll like be completely caught off guard. And if they do manage to conquer this, whatever that means, Majestic 12 might be doing their own research into the Greys because they don't trust aliens. They might have a deal with the Greys, but this is America we're talking about.
And there's also this odd event that's listed where it just mentions that there was a fight between one of their soundless black helicopters and quote unquote a stray Migo that isn't given a whole lot of detail. Holly, I know you were asking before we started recording if like that's where the lights were coming from, and it's ambiguous because it says that the lights are just the Migo floating around in the sky.
Oh, I think that's right.
But what about this helicopter fight then?
Majestic 12 is not aware of the Migo. They're only aware of the Greys. So, of course, they're just going to shoot at them.
Yeah, they're both around, and that's kind of the whole thing, right? Is like Majestic is watching the town, Migo's watching the town. They kind of intersect, but the Migo can't tell Majestic, "Hey, you shot down one of our guys," because it doesn't look like one of their guys.
Yes.
It looks like a fungal something, and they're expecting more of like a classic UFO, probably. So they just have to be like, "Man, I don't know anything about that, huh?" And meanwhile, there's a rest in peace Larry in the Migo break room.
Yeah, because the ruse is the Migo only interact with Majestic and everyone else via the Greys as proxies.
Yeah.
Would you say that that may be the beginnings of some bad blood brewing between them
Oh, for
and kind
sure.
of a bigger breakdown?
Mhm.
That there's an escalation and things as the Migo are like, you know what, fuck this, and starting to act more outside of their bounds.
I actually think that happens in the canon,
Yeah.
in the conspiracy source book
Mm.
after Groversville.
Yeah, this would be a really interesting time too as well if your players are having trouble. Have Majestic be friendly towards them in some ways and help them out because they may not trust the Migo for some reason. Maybe that helicopter shooting down the thing, they could bring the agents in and be like, this is weird. And they're really just going to use the agents as a cat's paw to go, hey, go look at this barn. Go see what happens. Oh, shit, they all died. Huh.
That could be an interesting way. Like you were talking about, that the lights in the sky was kind of a weakness of the scenario, that there's a bit of a hole that if they are not doing this and happen to roll appropriately, they just kind of don't find it. But maybe they get a contact from someone that knows the right terms and said, I'm your new handler. You should go
Oh, that's
here and
great.
check
Yeah.
this out. But like they
Mm.
don't know who Derringer is. They just say like, listen, I have orders and you need to go here.
I like that.
Are there any other things that you'd want to change in this?
Yes. As for the like surgical effects that the Migo can inflict upon the agents, there's no really good examples. There's only one example, I believe. So I just went ahead and just thought of some. It's like, bad eyes, they can become good eyes, perfect vision. You don't need your glasses anymore. A smoker can have perfect lungs and even breathe better at a more efficient rate. So maybe their stamina can go up. Um, See if someone's disfigured in a fight against proto matter, let's say. Maybe let's have their jaw explode and melt a bit. Maybe the next day they're just all fixed up. And that is just so creepy when the agent who's like, oh, my life's over, I'm disfigured forever. When they wake up with a fresh new jaw and like nothing has gone wrong, that's a good point of shock. If they're limping, they're no longer limping. Let's say if you're running this for pregens, have one of your agents have like a terminal disease that's gonna kill them in the end. But as soon as the Migo are done with them, they have no such symptoms and they're cured.
Nice.
Yeah, I definitely think if you're running this with pre-gens, then saying it's like you're a heavy smoker and like giving that as an RP clue, but you can then drop to that agent that you don't really need to smoke anymore. Like, gosh, the air smells so fresh and clean. But here's a question to you then, Alex, and everyone else. You mentioned making the eyes give supervision or night vision kind of thing like that.
Yeah.
If every organ ends up melting, the scenario is written that it's some kind of vital internal squishy organ. That way, whenever it melts, they're going to die. But if it's a non-essential organ, how would you kind of judge when and where to have an essential versus non-essential part of anatomy replaced? Because it feels like that could feel a little unfair to players, maybe.
Yeah, and there's definitely a way to deal with that for sure. There's a technique where you can roll walk and see if that's a vital organ or not. Like you don't need your eyes to live. However, you can make it less unfair if you have all of your players roll, like let's say 5 dice rolls at the beginning of the game. They'll have no idea what these are. But you're going to use these dice rolls in the order that they were rolled as these hidden rolls to determine if they get abducted or not. So, yeah, that's one way to make it more fair. I'm not saying it's going to be fair.
And that's kind of the problem, right? Is as soon as they're in the town and they drink the water, they get abducted. fairness is really out the window because the Migo can at any moment pull a Scott Adams on him and just be like, hey, your tongue, it kills you now. Like some part of you just kills you. There's not a lot you can do about it, but as a handler, don't be a dick about it. Like try and have it be a fun thing, I guess, rather than just oh, I don't like the way you're doing this. You're dead.
On that Scott Adams note, that was something I was wanting to talk about in this because I feel like there was room for a lot more that could have been done in his room to make it clear he was not prone to unaliving himself in the bathtub. He had plans to reach out to the doctor. He was perhaps reaching out and like actively calling people. There's messages at the front desk from like the National Enquirer or whatever that like they're trying to call him back because he cut off mid phone call and make it seem as if he was in the middle of sending this story out to multiple sources to try and blow the lid off of this. And that's when the kill switch really came in. Also, the scenario mentions this audio file that he has recorded, and it's unclear when that was actually recorded. It's a great digital handout that you can give to players. I'll attach a copy of it in the Google Drive for the show notes of this episode. But it keeps saying, you need to stop now. You need to stop now. So presumably that was kind of his kill switch signal, or at least something along the way. And maybe some other ways to make that kind of more realized may be able to help there.
So just another point on the organs failing, right? It is written into the book where if the agents do destroy the machine or equipment and the handler is feeling merciful, they can have that protomatter built into them, not kill them as some kind of other form. And I think that's fine. And it's really depends on your group.
Have you, Holly or Alex, when you've run this, have you given players essentially like superpowers, like Billy Ray?
I really haven't, and it's a good point, but I've always like improved vision, improved a smoker's lungs. I've done that, but it's just like basic upgrades. I've not really done like, absolutely crazy off the charts superhuman stuff.
Yeah, I wonder, do you think that would mess with the tone too much for agents to be, punching through walls on accident or something?
It's not the tone I'd go for personally. So
Yeah, I wouldn't give them like those superpowers that are super like interactable like that.
I think a gist that I am getting from reading it is they're getting better with each iteration. So that's why Billy Ray Spivey is all fucked up. Like he's in pain, he ran around, went rogue. So the Migo take notes as, darn, don't do that. But so that's where maybe when the agents are getting picked up, you are almost perfect. Like it is just an improvement with some unforeseen cost. I did like the note if their intestines or something get replaced is they don't need hardly any calories anymore, and anything that they eat is going to be put on as body fat.
Right.
Which I think could be a very weird kind of switcheroo for players that like, okay, you want to go eat at Merle's Diner, that's fine. You wake up in the morning and your stomach is bigger. They're going to think that they're pregnant or something, and it's going to freak them out even more. Which speaking of, Holly, I think you mentioned something with Jane Allen's kid earlier.
Oh yeah, and I like to accelerate that. So something that I always do is give a pre-gen with the medical background because I feel like it allows for the uncovering of a lot of interesting things, like allowing them to do an examination of Billy Ray or an autopsy if they so choose, instead of just like giving them that information as like a info dump in the beginning, like Derringer's written to do. I like having them dig into him. They're like, we don't know what's going on with this kid. He just did this. We grabbed him. He's in the other room if you want to look at him. And so with Jane Allen, that's the same thing as a lot of the time they'll want to do, some kind of delivery or a C-section or something and see what the hell's going on here. Regardless, I always have her have that cute little alien baby somewhere in the scenario, because why not?
He's just a little guy.
To be
Like
fair,
the Men in Black scene, just like delivering a little squid baby.
but he is just a baby, right? Like as written, he looks like a person. I mean, he's just protomatter, I think, from the way they describe it. But
it's the amniotic fluid is protomatter, so it says the baby's human, but the amniotic fluid was protomatter, so it's kind of weird and different, and such details are up to the handler. I don't think that is written to go really anywhere.
Yeah, it's not. And personally, this is just personal. I find it to be less exciting to have her just deliver a normal kid. So I'm like, no, she's gonna have a split baby. But
Okay.
there could be something scary about delivering a normal child in 4 weeks of pregnancy
Yeah.
too, and then you're wondering like, what's wrong with this kid? So I mean,
Fungus
there's two sides to
baby.
this. Yeah, there's two completely valid ways to tackle that.
Or the baby just asks, "Who are you?"
Huh?
Ooh, I like that.
Billy Ray
It's
was
like
my
rabbit. If
papa.
your
What?
players still aren't at the end of the game by like day 2, it's a teenager and it's just sulking in the corner somewhere.
Ah, that makes me think of that episode of Fringe, which like the old man that withers, and it's fucking gross. I love it. On that note with Billy Ray, I was a bit annoyed that it just says, here's this spray that can detect everything that is crucial in this scenario. Go for it. It says that like they got it from something relating to Billy Ray, but personally, I would be very tempted to make Billy Ray melt down the longer he is away from Groversville. And that they may not want to go into details, but that Billy Ray died while they were in Groversville, and that his arms and legs literally melted into puddles
Ooh, that's
inside
good.
a bag of his skin.
That's fun.
And like, so they derived the sample based off of that, but that can also give them big signs of whatever it is absolutely localized to this area. So they need to dig in deeper.
On the subject of Billy Ray, and to like extend out some gameplay and make your players feel great, you can have the bullet points that are initially just given to you for free by Derringer, which is like, oh, this is what the medical examination said. XYZ. Have the players go in and interview Billy Ray and conduct the medical examination themselves. That's something that Holly did in her game that I really enjoy and respect because, once again, that makes your players feel good. They actually did something.
Well, they feel like they're discovering the clues,
Right.
not
Yeah,
just being
yeah.
handed them.
I'm not a fan of an info dump. So yeah. Actually, so if we're talking about like changes in general, one of my favorite, so I always include a medical professional. I try to include a scientist. Something that I've only done in like the last run, but I actually really liked it, and it's an underutilized occupation in my opinion with Delta Green is the media specialist. So I included that in the last run I did, and they had a lot of fun like running down where all these media info sources were, and so they had a role there. Also, like, how do you handle the information coming out of this town, and like how are you going to cover it up?
So something that I had mentioned earlier that I think could be fun on that kind of media specialist angle is how would you want to give Phenomenex more of a presence in the scenario? Maybe it's just my bias. I love Phenomenex. They're a bunch of lovable idiots, in my opinion. But having them like record and follow the agents around, yes. But again, I really feel like MJ12 would have told the Greys to not touch these Phenomenex idiots in their giant white van because they need them as part of this disinformation campaign. So, ironically, the agents are going to be pushed away from Phenomenex because they're annoying as hell, but sticking close to them would be the safest thing for them. And I feel like there's a lot that you can capitalize on with lights in the windows of the hotel, because a lot of the key discoveries are just like, oh, this room right next door has the pregnant girl in it, and we just didn't know. We heard banging on the walls and just thought it was regular neighbors.
Well, the Phenomenex could be a really nice way to help vector towards the barn. So you could have Phenomenex be there more. I think we crashed their van at one point.
Yeah, you stole their van.
But they could have seen the lights that now the Migo are making people not see, right? So you might have kind of the classic videotape that they're talking about. You could even have them showing it to people. Maybe your agents show up and the Phenomenex is trying to show the motel owner these videotapes of these very clear lights heading north out of town. And the person behind the counter is just going, I don't see anything. That looks like nothing to me. It really Westworld it up.
Or something that could be really fun with that is, I love this idea that Phenomenex, of all people, can actually find the barn before the agents just by sheer dumb luck and actually watching the skies. But what if they do get to the barn and the Migo are like, well, cat's out of the bag, and will proto-matter and brainwash them and then drop them back at the hotel. And so now all of a sudden they're polite and helping the agents. It is completely out of character for them. And maybe like their van was beside the road. Or what I think would be interesting is that like if the agents interview Phenomenex and ask him, where were you? Oh, we were just here. We got pizza from Merle's Pizzeria just down the road. And then they watch the tapes and the tapes show them in the van going out to the barn or something like that. Getting that miscommunication might be another way to help vector them towards the barn. Whenever they're there, I mean, we've all kind of mentioned a few grievances with the final climax at the barn. What would you recommend doing to try and smooth that out at the table?
Right, so the climax at the barn's pretty rough. Actually, any combat in this scenario is pretty rough. Like the Alderman blob is like
Oh, Lord.
immune to mostly everything besides like fire. And like I said earlier, there's like 6 Migo that may or may not just show up. So one thing that I usually do is add a green box and give them what they need to handle their stuff. Like give them some weaponry, give them like just one grenade or improvised explosive something, and that could come with an interesting complication because like let's say they use a grenade to blow up town hall and then everyone's just acting like it's fine. That's a great moment. That's a
Yeah.
great scene as well because of that proto matter. As for the barn scene itself, you could definitely edit the number of Migo to match the lethality you definitely want for this kind of game. Um, and it's better to go lower too, because if you go lower, more can come in as a reinforcement as needed to keep that pace at the right level.
For that green box, I completely agree with the barn. That makes a lot of sense, really, to just have them kind of start coming in. But that green box, do you have it in town? Do you have it something that they like pass through on the way to the town? What do you do with that?
I usually have it on the way in to the town. So like they go visit it once and then they get into the meat and potatoes of the scenario. Because Groversville, it's already like compromised. It's a hotbed of proto
Right.
matter activity. Have them just come in with the stuff and then be done with it. They're gonna take everything.
Or counteroffer, what if that's where they pick up the Groversville stuff? That Derringer calls them and says, we have a resource for you at this location. We call them green boxes. And they can find some other random shit that's in storage, but there's a crate of basically like Lysol cleaning bottles that has a little bow on it that's labeled Groversville batch.
I accept your counteroffer. Okay, it
That's
works.
good. I like that.
Works.
See, I was thinking with that, I'd almost want the agents to be involved with creating it. So maybe you have Derringer say, like, we're working on something. We've got Billy Ray's portion, but we need more things that are compromised. You know, there are all these cows that, as written, like, they're very clearly compromised. That might be a chance to highlight that portion of the section is have the agents go out and take samples out of the cows, take it to Derringer. He whips up the purple spray, leaves it at the green box, whatever. And then then they spray and they go, oh, it's not just the cows. Oh no. Oh no.
Right.
Plus, I love a good cow abduction. That's classic UFO stuff. Like, are
It
they
is.
abducting foxes? No, cows.
All cow.
What about deer? Cow.
It's got to be something you have a cow on top of one of the buildings. It's
Yeah.
just, oh no, it can jump really high.
Huh?
It's got grasshopper legs.
Ooh.
I
That's
really do
horrifying.
like one of my favorite aspects of this is playing up how oblivious everyone else in town is and just like obstructively oblivious. Like they go to the sheriff's office to check in because of course you always check in with the Leos before you start doing an investigation. And the front office is literally plastered with over 100 missing persons posters. And the sheriff is just like, they just wandered off one day or just I don't know those people.
They make me put them up, but I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah. That
They'll come home.
5-year-olds do that all the time, right? They go wandering.
They're just normal
Wandering.
5-year-olds.
One of my favorite aspects along those lines in some of the APs that I've listened to, I'm struggling to isolate which one I heard it done in, but I would recommend GMs to write down several kind of key buzzword expressions and then
Ooh,
have
that's good.
random people throughout the town keep using those expressions. Like that repetition, it's going to go from weird to uncanny to uncomfortable very quickly.
Oh, if anyone's played the Psychonauts, the Milkman conspiracy level, like
Oh.
I am a construction worker.
My milk is delicious.
Yes.
I love that level, Alex. That is like
Yeah.
top of my
Fantastic.
video game levels of all time.
I am a construction worker. I improve public utilities. I am a garbage man. I empty garbage cans.
Do not make me replay Psychonauts just for that
It's
level,
such an
please.
amazing game. But back on track. How do we add more clues that point towards the barn, right?
Mhm.
So you can do like tracing phone calls, like matching property. Like we talked, Lex's great idea of like all these people who've called in these issues are like someone who's dead, and like it's all property matches up to like a home and then a barn, and then the home is just like a phone call where everything's coming from, and then the barn's in the backyard or some shit like that. Um, Phenomenex just having those clues.
Phenomenex finds it first. Holy shit.
Phenomenex finds it first.
Oh
Just
God.
a slap in the face.
Yeah. You could like worst case scenario, Scott Adams takes notes, like, or if you dig in his diary and it's like, oh, I went to this, I went to check out this place, nothing was there, but then the next day's entry is like, I feel like shit, what's happening, something like
I
that.
feel like garbage.
Yeah.
My skin.
Or he's like writing, I went to the barn, nothing was there in all caps. Something
Yes.
just
Oh,
off.
that's good.
Oh,
I
yeah.
like
I
that.
like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I like that a lot.
Because there's that handout that's given with all of his notes where it's like 8 chickens and some of the cattle
It's
mutilated,
a weird note.
and just say like
Yeah.
nothing in the
Weird
barn.
note.
Like,
Yeah.
that may be a little too obvious, but I really like that train of thought.
Oh, I was thinking about his diary. His diary
Yeah.
entry is so strange.
Yeah, maybe have notes at like the listening post if you want to include that in the game of
Yeah.
Majestic's own
I like
private
that, yeah.
investigation into the Greys.
Yeah, I'd be tempted to add like straight up, if they're far enough along and your players just aren't getting there, have the helicopter fly over the town.
Oh yeah, that's
Nobody
good.
notices it at all, but it's very clearly heading north towards
that's
the
good.
barn.
Yeah, I like that. To the hills. And I think some of Adam's notes point to like in the hills, we see lights in the
Right.
hills. There's like a helicopter maybe in the hills. So yeah, that can all point to it. I just had a thought. What would you guys think about, and this isn't pointing to the barn, but like at some point in the scenario, like players wake up, they leave their hotel room, and it's like the whole town is just standing in the town square.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's a good scene.
Just like staring at them.
Yeah, I
or
think
something.
Do they do the point and scream too?
I definitely think the way that I'd run it, that would be towards the end.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, of course, that'd
as
have to be toward
everything
the
is
end.
melting down. But
No,
just
at the start, right? Just-
welcome.
that would change the mood.
No,
of the
it's
game
raining and they're all
forever.
like turkeys staring up with their mouths open. That's your intro.
Choking.
Huh? My God. All right. Last but not least, let's address the Migo kill switch, right? How if the Migo do decide to just, flip a button, flip a switch and then kill everyone, how do we choreograph that? I think that you can have the agents get sick and they're slowly getting sick over the 8 hours and they feel like they are going to die. Maybe have some townsfolk just die a little earlier. That way the agents make that connection saying, oh, if we don't do something quick, we're going to die. And that might hasten their exploration of the barn.
So you'd give them a chance to actually
Yes.
get a cure, because I'm not even sure. Is there a cure?
Yes, there is
as
a cure written
Okay.
in where if they destroy the lab equipment at the barn, it'll disable that super
Like it
virus.
becomes inert or
Right.
something. Yeah.
Yeah.
I counterpoint. I just don't like the kill switch. To
Mhm.
me, I just take it out as a possibility. I always want the players to find the barn. So I don't want there to be an instance where, they've uncovered too much. They've called in the CDC and the Migo are like, fuck this, kill switch, and that's the end of the scenario. That's not a very interesting conclusion to me. So I always want them to find the barn.
And actually, on that note, thank you for reminding me, Holly, because this is one of the few scenarios that I would never stop my players from trying to call in the CDC and say, we got to quarantine this.
Mm.
Because what is there for the CDC to find? they have some untested fluorescent pink spray and they're going to say, it's in everything. Who the fuck are you? And like, oh, it's these people have been abducted. You look crazy. And so if they even manage to pull the strings to get CDC folks down there, they're going to look like idiots. And they're going to say, oh my God, you're just more of those conspiracy nuts. And that can be a way to really capitalize on some sand loss from hopelessness, that no one is going to believe you, which I think is a very scary place to be in.
Yeah, that's a great point. So we can see it in two ways. One, no one believes you. You got that helplessness. Or race against time, hurry up because everyone's dying. Both are valid.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I don't feel like I used the disease. Like, it's not telegraphed enough.
Right.
And I kind of like the idea that the Migo, if they get sick of it, they just leave. They literally have Majestic there to do disinformation and cleanup. At that point, it just transitions from you see floating lights fly by, and then it's the government.
Having them leave just sucks.
Right. It's the government that starts showing up, and maybe they, do an Innsmouth where they start dragging people off.
Do an Innsmouth.
It transitions. It just, I don't know. It feels better than a random out of nowhere virus, but I'm interested. Holly, what do you think?
Okay. So all this talk about calling in the CDC gave me a thought, and I want your opinions on it, because even as I was churning this in my head, I was waffling back and forth on whether or not it would be interesting or viable. This scenario, but your players are the CDC that has been called in. Not by Delta Green, but like there's this kid and like he's got something weird going on with his musculoskeletal system. Or I don't know, maybe not. It was a thought.
I think that that does take away the you are also part of conspiracy aspect with Delta Green.
Never mind, scrap it.
I could potentially see that more if it was his girlfriend who got out. And then they happen to trace down that like there was also this weird thing, and then that's another layer to it they could bring in.
That, or your players are conspiracy theorists chasing the weird.
That'd be fun.
Yeah,
the campaign.
The one thing that comes to mind for both of those options is that drive. Like, what's gonna give them that drive to arm up and confront that issue and stop it?
And not just leave when they go, oh no, everybody's freaky. I'm good.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's a great question. Hypothetically, what would you do if your players tried to start leaving? Would the sheriff block the roads down?
That's when the town meets them in the town square.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good question. That's the fair question.
Or Derringer says, do it.
Yeah, it's a fair question. I don't often consider, because like the axioms of Delta Green are that you like finish the job basically. But what is to stop someone to be like, I'm not doing this.
Right. Because hypothetically, I remember, Holly, in your game, Tom is very Ripley from Aliens, and he's just like, no, we should burn the whole place down. Fuck it. We're going to make a crater. We're going to bomb it from orbit. That's the only way to be sure. So if they happen to go to their handler and say like, nah, just firebomb it. Like, I'm just wondering if there would be ways to circumvent that. Only because I like to think of worst case scenarios.
Just, is that a feasible, like, they're not with the program? So at this point.
Yeah, they're cowboys.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a tough sell to be like, I would like to bomb this town.
How would you cover that?
Cover up. What's the cover up?
Yeah.
Good point.
How would you make the ask? But
tell the agents as the handler, okay, how are you going to cover this up?
Yeah.
And your players are going to like struggle.
Like the resources alone to do something like that are also like crazy.
Although I would love to see them try like in the town setting charges or something.
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, see, the amount of sand loss would just be like, oh.
Well, and the way that, and maybe this isn't the best way to do it, I'll admit that. But like by the time Tom was ready to call in the CDC, it was like, sure, it's going to take more than a day to convince a government agency to do something about, like, it's going to take a minute, and then, your game concludes before that can occur. So,
Or I wonder if hypothetically by the point agents may even be getting to that level that they have been abducted, and they start getting these whispering like, your mind is changed, and it's by some kind of foreign presence. That can make the player feel, oh, something is very wrong with me, but my agent doesn't recognize that.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, that would be a great sand loss to be talking on the phone to your handler, and your
Oh,
agent's like, I tell him I want to firebomb this place, and you just say, okay, what you say is, I'm gonna keep looking into this, but I don't think we're finding much, and you hang up the phone.
Oh, that's
I
so fucking
fucking love
good.
that. Yes.
That's great.
Okay. Throwing all the hypotheticals out of the window,
Yeah.
Get out of it.
what would you really like this to run like at your table?
Um, from experience, I have run it in a 5 hour like one shot, and they basically see Billy Ray Spivey in the next room. They'd go to town, arm up at the green box. They'd get a place to stay at because that's just standard operating procedure. Probably Merle's, right? So that way you can have them move in and out of their motel room and maybe see Jane like peeking out, and then they'd start interviewing the people that are in charge, like the sheriff, the alderman, looking into these UFO sightings and looking into these disinformation campaigns. And eventually they'll find Scott's room, which will lead to the lights and therefore the end game.
Ooh, I just had an idea with that. If they're staying in the hotel and you want to
Yep.
tip them off to Scott's
Yep.
room, he does have protomatter in the tub that's trying to get out, so they
The
can hear a
pipes.
tap, tap, tap,
Ooh,
tap
that's good.
constantly. Could be a good way to get them to look in the door.
Yeah. And at some point they'd obviously find out that the entire town's infected via
Mhm.
the spray before, most likely before they even get to Scott's room. At least that's what's happened in my experience.
Mm.
I usually pace it around the same time, actually. Like they find Scott, they find Jane. It's like, Jesus Christ, this is all going to hell. And it's like, well, here's some spray. Here you go.
Get you a gift bag.
Oh, it's worse. Yay.
Yeah. In my
Yay.
experience, the 3 times I've run this, they've shipped Jane off to Derringer.
Yeah.
And they'd also interview Jane's parents as well as Billy Ray Spivey's parents,
Mhm.
parent.
Yep.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Dad. We never mentioned that the dad got his chest punched through by Billy Ray, did we?
Yeah,
He
that's
got
crazy.
Falco punched, yeah.
Yeah, he did.
And then like everyone's just so nonchalant about it. Like, oh, teenage boys, they don't know their own strength.
Boys will be boys.
You know what would be great is if the mess is still in Billy Ray Spivey's room. The mom never
Mm.
even cleaned it up.
Ugh.
Yeah. I like, and this is kind of a pacing thing too, of like the slow dread, the slow build of dread. And then to me, the Scott Adams, Jane Allen, Spray trio kind of kicks off the like really fast roll downhill
Mhm.
of like everything's going wrong, figure it out. It's all gone to hell. You're abducted, he's abducted, everyone's
So, in your experiences, then, have you found that there were just certain parts that didn't really work at the table for you?
Something that I found and multiple times I've run this that becomes confusing is that you have both Scott and the Phenomenex guys investigating this. So you have two completely different groups of people like poking around town, asking too many questions. And it can be easy for players to assume that Scott is one of the Phenomenex guys because everyone just refers to them as those Phenomenex guys. They're like, oh yeah, he's one of them. And so it just delays people in finding him, I think, a little bit.
I think that that's where I would want to emphasize something that is written in the scenario is that every townsperson refers to Scott Adams as, quote, that UFO guy. And so I would try to emphasize that the Phenomenex crew always sticks together in a group, and to maybe call attention that people are referencing that it's just the one guy is a singular. And maybe if they happen to chat with someone, they have a card for Frank Karen Cola, but I would be more inclined to make a card for Scott Adams to more clearly indicate, oh, this person has already been here and they are not Phenomenex.
There is a online resource that has Scott Adams's business card, and it says, saucer watch the skies. And like the handwritten note on there, I'm staying at Merle's Shut Eye Inn, room 207. Like it's
Oh, I like that.
there's a business card available online.
Yeah, I'll have to link that in the show notes.
There's
Yes.
some more lures you could use to get the players to Scott Adams's hotel room, and that's like,
Yeah.
oh, something's wrong with the plumbing. Like, there's banging on the pipes that apparently no one's addressing because it's completely normal. And if those players that are very curious, they could listen for the bangs in the pipes, and they could see it go all the way back to Scott Adams' room. I mean, I'm sure you'll have to maybe hand wave the stopper being in, but it's easy enough.
Yeah, I think my plan whenever I run this is to have Scott Adams' room be next to the ice machine so that whenever people have to go out and get ice just staying at a shitty hotel, then they'll just hear this metallic tap, tap, tap.
Yeah.
If they start the ice machine, it stops as if it's waiting, and then tap, tap, tap
Ooh, that's
to
creepy.
give a better indication that something's fucking wrong.
Or you could flood their toilets.
That too.
Nothing will get them moving faster.
Then you can just dream catcher them.
Oh my God, I remember that scene in Dreamcast. Stupid. Also, funny to attack your player characters when they're on the toilet because they
Oh.
don't expect that at all.
That's if the aldermen get away and want vengeance.
Yikes. They come out of the toilet. I think that I would say the Migo fight's kind of rough, but like I reduced it down to 3 Migo and had 3 agents die. I get that it's the climax, but like I don't know, it seems like really tough. It seems like they'd all get slaughtered.
Did you say you reduced it down to 3 Migos?
Trace?
Hey.
Trace, okay. All right.
I reduced it down. I reduced it down even further. I just put
Yeah.
2 in there. Like it's yeah. The beginning can be kind of slow because players don't have a ton to start with other than like here's this kid, so you could maybe go talk to his parents or see his home. I always add the car, his truck, and the weird like the whole thing's magnetic now, which always, tips people off into it was a UFO, it was an abduction, but
Ooh, what if a cow is magnetic to get into
Uh,
Nathan's?
The one thing I like and I guess don't like at the same, I love the audio recording, which very charmingly, if you can find the first unspeakable oath number, whatever, that this all very first appeared in, where Majestic 12 is listed as the NSA, by the way. They're not even Majestic 12, it's just the NSA. You can send in, I think, a floppy disk and some money for shipping and handling, and they would send it back to the audio files sent back to you. But they don't, it's meaningless. Like it's kind of a fun thing to listen to, but it doesn't actually mean anything. And you
Oh
can,
yeah, the clue goes nowhere.
it goes nowhere.
It's just
and
creepy.
You can kind
It's
of
just-
have people really spin their wheels on it. Like, what does it mean? Like, it means nothing. Just leave it alone.
I think that it's creepy, but to me, whenever I was listening to it, that was the turning point of like, it is motherfucking aliens.
It is aliens.
Because everything else is like, it can't be. It can't. Son of a bitch. And yeah, I love that kind of switcheroo for the Greys.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'd be tempted to very much Manchurian Candidate is if they play this recording and the other agents that have been changed are in the room, hear it, they like are starting to draw their guns. They're starting to,
Oh, that's great. That's such a
aim
great
towards
idea.
that and do
Now everyone
POW
has guns
checks.
pointed at each other.
Right, do checks against it, but I just think it'd be very cool to have a kill code for anybody in the town,
That's
really.
cool. Yeah, I do like that.
Oh shit, that just gave me an idea though. What if the way that they find this recording is Scott Adams is recording voice notes to himself in the very Twin Peaks style, and there's some kind of bizarre internet dial-up tone, and that whenever that tone goes off on the tape, anyone who has been abducted freezes, stands stock still, straight as a rod.
Yeah.
And then there's that voice that's coming in over the speakers because like he was still while recording and then got that message that he needs to stop. That may be a little more in-universe way of dropping that, but also
That's
tip
great.
off who has been abducted.
Love that.
Yeah, that's something the players could weaponize too.
Mhm.
And then look on in horror as they begin to
Oh, like play it on the town intercom
Yeah,
speakers.
Yeah, and then
Oh no.
one way that they can actually bite them back because they're now also infected with proto matter, but like maybe it hasn't gotten full hold yet until they stay later in the town, and then they realize, oh, this is affecting us too. Yeah.
So I know that we've mentioned war stories a few times so far. What do you guys got? Hit me. I'm looking forward to running this after this.
All right. Bathtub scene I love my bathtub fight scenes. So I had an agent just have protomatter like latch onto his face, and it basically dissolved his jaw before escaping. And that's where the story with the Migo repairing his jaw came from. And that was just a creepy moment. He hated that. He hated that so much.
Yeah.
Did he go to a hospital or was he just like,
No,
I'll nap
he
it
just
off in
hid
the
in
hotel
his
room?
motel room because he was also the face of the Delta Green like
Uh,
agents. So he's like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And
Oh boy, like
everyone's like,
making
just go to bed. It's fine. We'll deal with this in the morning. In the
Mhm.
morning,
sleep
Just
it
go to
off.
bed.
everything's
Someone
fine.
who's got their jaw ripped. Sleep
Just
it
just sleep
off.
it off.
Yeah,
Rub
I
some
mean,
just
what
dirt
are
in
sleep
they
it
gonna
off.
do? Argue with you? Come on.
Take a salt tablet. Here's a clean
Um,
pair of socks.
yeah, so you got a new jaw. A bunch of other agents got some new parts, and then towards the end, they basically blew up the lab equipment, and they didn't even go in the barn at all. So they blew up the lab equipment, and the people like rule as written, right? The people with the modifications, they just start to like the modifications start to melt off. The stuff stops working. So like two agents just like died in front of the rest of the three. And one of the agents is like, "What the hell did you just do? You killed my friend." And then they start to get into a shootout with each other. One guy dives behind a tractor, another one dives behind the barn, and they're just shooting at each other. One of them gets killed. And then Majestic 12 pulls up and they're like, "There's only two agents left." So the way that I'm playing with Majestic 12, like if there's two agents left, they just had a shootout. They're just gonna mop them up. They're not gonna say, "Oh, well, we know you're Delta Green." No, they're just a liability at this point. So they six people opened up with submachine guns, mowed down one guy. Another person, the last agent jumped into the last working car. I gave him three like drive rolls to like start his car, and he filled all three and
Oh
just got
no.
riddled with bullets in his car. And the last scene was the NRO Delta agents. They just like took all the bodies, put it in the barn, and then set it all on fire. And that was pretty memorable.
Ollie, do you want to tell the story about people dissolving on the road? Because I seem to
Oh.
remember that.
I'm trying to remember who it was, but yeah, I think when I ran it for End of the Darkness, um, when I ran it a time, I abducted multiple people. Unfortunately, some people just don't have the good sense to use the buddy system. They just wander off on their own. And near the end, yeah, Delta Green comes in, mocks them, pats them on the head, says, "Go run off and tell Alphonse you did a good job." And yeah, so a bunch of them are like, "Fuck yeah, I'm getting the hell out of here." And then of course, when everything goes inert, it's like I'm in the middle of driving and my eyeballs are melting out of my skull. Unlucky. They thought they got away. Alas, they did not. And people are always delighted by the audio file. Like that's just it's the handout that's like a little bit of an extra mile, and people just love that. So I love giving it to them, especially if someone's like, "Wait, slow it down," or play it backward,
Mhm.
like try this, and then I am like, "Here you go," and they're like, "Oh, it worked."
Nice. I think I may try to make a backwards and forwards version of that audio file to link in the show notes in case people want to do that. That sounds really fun. Also, the more I think about it, the more I think I'm going to make my protomatter tied to the location of Groversville, such that the longer and farther away someone gets from the site, the more the material starts to break down. So while Billy Ray is in the hospital, his protomatter will break down into this sludge and turn him basically into a skin balloon.
Ugh.
And maybe that's how Derringer takes some samples of it and creates the Groversville batch and maybe leaves a note to maybe give a little extra hint to the players.
Mhm.
If I end up making something, I'll link it in the show notes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good way for the players to get that little hint that, oh, this stuff fails.
So do you all have any ideas to potentially expand the scenario? It sounds like the ending is pretty final.
Yeah.
But are there any ways you would bring it back, or...
So I should have come a little bit better prepared on this. There is supposed to be kind of a spiritual sequel to Convergence. And I'm trying, let me think, let me see if I can find it. Because it's not, I don't even think it's Arc Dream, but
Divergence. Oh.
you guys
Ooh.
cover the rest and I'll look it up.
After some internet sleuthing, we're pretty sure the scenario is called Transference and was published in the Cyberpunk 2020 fanzine The Interface. Although everyone seems to have largely disavowed the scenario since then, so do with that what you will.
I think the handler Derringer in the conspiracy source book, he eventually gets taken over by I think a Yithian, which is just super random. Like I don't know why they did that.
See, and that ties into where I'd want to go with this is a little bit more Twin Peaksy, is have the agents show up, but maybe have the handler stress that like you cannot raise, suspicion. You need to keep this on the DL. So have them working a little bit slower and insert some other mystery first. So that as they're working, then you start to introduce this idea of like, oh, the townspeople they're a little weird. They're a little, yeah, Lex is falling asleep just listening.
No, that was
to this
involuntary.
idea. But no, I think that would be the opposite way of this is, I agree, a very tight one where you can run it and it kind of, I think Alex said what, 5 hours?
Yeah.
You can knock this out, no problem. But if you wanted to go a little bit longer, Derringer's pretty interesting. It would be interesting to have a campaign where your guy gets swapped in the middle of it with a Yithian.
I do love in one of Alex's scenarios that I won't name for spoilers' sake, is you brought the spray bottle that said Groversville batch on it as one of the green box items. And
That's a
for
great
folks
green
that
box item
have
for
read
future.
or played this, that is the best fucking red herring because I was spraying everything and you would and like I'm going to send you a private message. Nothing happens. And I was just like, God damn it.
I'm just the dick. Oof. Actually, it's not quite an expansion, but like it's definitely another callback. I had a member of my Impossible Landscapes group. He's a member of Phenomenex, and he's also a DG agent. And when he was first sent off to that first scenario in Night Floors, um, the home scene of him was him at work at Phenomenex headquarters, and all the rest of his coworkers have this brand new case at Groversville. And they're all
cool.
going to Groversville, but he needs to stay here, and he can take some vacation time. But the funny thing is that player, he was the same one that got machine gunned down at Groversville as another agent. So he's like, "Oh my God, I just I dodged a bullet."
This can only get better.
Yeah, it did not get better.
And really, why is there not a Migo campaign for this? Like, there's so many Migo references in everything. It seems like, is there like we got to tie these together? This one's a little too lethal, probably, but that majestic Migo relationship is really interesting. It's fun to play the Men in Black.
I think what I'm hearing that would be more interesting, at least for me to go through, is more MJ12 Migo shenanigans, because I think Majestic is such an interesting entity that is only ever kind of referred to in lore dumps and scenarios, but players don't get to interact with them very much. And I think that they can be a very interesting spin to up the paranoia in anything they're in.
The history of Delta Green, and if you look at the timeline, which I'm not going to be able to recite from the top of my head, but at some point, Delta Green realizes truly that MJ12 is compromised. And then mysteriously, the person who sends out that missive dies by suicide. And so just kind of, I don't know, maybe that's just more interesting as a story than a scenario, but that to me is interesting. Or like investigating the suicide of this person, and that leads you to the aftermath of Groversville, which now doesn't extend the scenario. It's like the pre-scenario. I don't know.
I mean, that's fine though.
Prequels, baby.
Yeah, that's the campaign, right? Is you could have
Right.
a Groversville based thing. That'd be kind of cool. Also, I do have one more thought towards this. Jane Allen's kid, I don't know if it's the, religious person in me from way back when, but I want to have it be like, this is our new leader of our church, the Migo baby.
Oh
And
no.
it's like growing up too fast. And like, we worship this super powered person. He's got amazing charisma. He can just lead people that he touches on the forehead. And, it can get real creepy real fast.
So Lex, I already see that you posted up the bathtub protomatter, statted up. You worked really quick. So that's going to be available in our show notes.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to link that one up. I just tried to take, basically, I halved a lot of the stats from the Alderman and then added a couple of other aspects to it that should make for a more fun encounter than just telling you what I did. But making it very small so it's hard to aim at to shoot it, that really they need to try stepping on it or bludgeoning it to really hurt it worth anything.
And a D8 damage is a good amount because that's a substantial amount of damage. It might like melt a body part or something, and which is then perfect for the Migo to replace that damaged part.
Yeah.
Because I think my main thing is that I don't want to kill any agents in this encounter. But you're absolutely right, Alex, that like finding a way to fuck them up and then have them be fine the next day will be great paranoid vibes from all the players.
Who knows? Maybe one person will try to like cut that limb off.
And then it grows back.
Ugh.
We hope our deranged utterings are helpful in bringing this game to life at your table. You can join the autopsy discussion on Discord and subscribe or follow the podcast to hear more gruesome cases. Be sure to check out the show notes for links on where to find the scenario, where to find us, and other links for things like handouts, actual plays of the scenario that we recommend, and other resources. So until next time, thanks for listening to RPG Reanimators,
Where your games can die.
Or live.
On the table. I will find the name of that fucking scenario. It's not Arc
You've said
Dream.
it
That's
to
just
me
the
before.
problem.
Yeah.
It's the problem.
Yeah.
It's not Arc Dream.
I
So
know.
anytime I go digging for it, I can't find the damn answer to it.
My protoplasm
I am the
is
milkman.
leaking.
My milk
I gotta
is
go.
delicious.
Should probably
I
get that looked at.
Bye.
I actually have to run Impossible Landscapes in 10
Oh,
minutes.
good lord.
Oh,
good
shit.
luck, my man.
Oh, run.
Yeah,
Go
get
for it.
out of here.
No need to run.
I wish I had that problem.
You
Oh
gonna
my
ever
God,
finish it?
Lex, it's so bad. No,
No?
we haven't fucking finished it.
We
Let's
haven't
see.
even met again.
Oh,
He seems
no.
like a sore point.
Just a bit.
I feel like Billy and I are just about to do this damn thing ourselves.
Honestly, yeah, you are. One way or
I
another,
mean,
I'm going to
have
drag you through
Nathan
it.
play. It's fine.
Oh,
Nathan's going to play
I come in
Asa.
as a
Oh, I don't know about that.
Bonjour.
That guy's a creep.
And would you like to see the inside of my bathtub?
Who would win?
It's like he's got a bad
Adolf
French accent.
Lepus
Yeah, because
or
he's not
Asa
really
de
French.
Bondy.
Is
Yeah,
Adolf Lepus a cell?